David Chase's hit television series The Sopranos largely centers around the Italian mafia, the Italian culture and lifestyle, the American dream, murder, power and hierarchy, sex, and religion. While we do see these themes present throughout the series' 6 seasons, however, the majority of the show consists of themes such as depression, death, suicide, and mental illness. Before we get started, be sure to click subscribe and click the bell to get notifications on all upcoming Soprano videos. When we're first introduced to Tony Soprano, we find out that he's a middle-aged man who happens to be the boss of a New Jersey crime family. Tony seems to have accomplished the classic American dream. He has a beautiful wife in Carmela, 2 children, and lives in a gorgeous mini mansion. With all this at the hands of Tony, you would think that he has it all. However, this is incorrect, as Tony battles depression and anxiety throughout the 6 seasons, and as a result, he visits a therapist to treat his chronic panic attacks. While Tony may disconnect himself from society by his life of crime, with Tony's mental health issues, he becomes so relatable to the characters that deal with depression throughout the show, but also the audience itself. Throughout the series, we watch as Tony commits numerous crimes, but instead of wondering who will Tony have murdered next, we are left wondering, will Tony continue to see Dr. Melfi in order to cure his depression? In the mafia lifestyle that Tony and his family experience on a daily basis, they, along with everyone else, are surrounded by a dark world that features death, depression, and suicide. While their lives may be all glamour from the outside, inside, they're surrounded by a dark world. When it comes to depression, it's linked to family experiences and history. A mental illness like depression indicates a psychological disorder that impairs a person's thoughts, moods, and overall behavior. Depression itself exists in a variety of forms. The most common is major depression, something that we see in a wide variety of characters throughout the show. Major depression includes themes of emptiness, loneliness, and guilt. The subject of depression is visible throughout all 6 seasons, but we first get a glimpse of it in season 1. We're first introduced to the dark themes of depression, death, suicide, and mental illness in the series' pilot, where Tony discusses how he's happy on the outside, but on the inside, he's sad.
I find I have to be the sad clown, laughing on the outside, crying on the inside.
While depression can be seen in Tony, it can also be visible in his mother, Livia. We watch as Tony feels suffocated by his mother, but also we're treated to an early discovery of a possible source of Tony's depression.
And kill me now. Go on, go into the ham. And take the carving knife and stab me, here.
We see the connection with depression in Tony early on, most notably when his friend Pussy has disappeared. In Season 1, Episode 12, Isabella, we watch as Tony stays in bed all day in his pajamas while in the dark. He displays traits of emptiness and loneliness throughout his dreamlike venture.
I don't feel nothing. Nothing. Dead. Empty.
He even looks down on himself and displays guilt towards his life.
I'm not a husband to my wife. I'm not a father to my kids. I'm not a friend to my friends. I'm nothing.
Tony even goes as far as stating suicidal threats towards Melfi.
You got any idea what my life would be worth if certain people found out I checked into a laughing academy?
Your life is boxing us in.
Well, I'll take a gun and I'll blow my fucking head off.
And later on in Season 2, Tony questions the entire purpose of life.
You go to Italy, you lift some weights, you watch a movie. It's all a series of distractions till you die.
However, in Season 1, Tony isn't the only one who suffers from depression. We see this with Christopher in Season 1, Episode 8, The Legend of Tennessee Moltisanti, as Christopher contemplates leaving the mafia to pursue a career as a screenwriter. He feels as if everything he's done for Tony means nothing and that he's getting overlooked. He feels guilty about his first murder that results in Christopher having odd dreams featuring Emil, and even goes as far as digging up and relocating his body. We see his depression visible throughout the episode. Christopher can often be seen laying in bed and feeling empty.
You ever feel like nothing good was ever gonna happen to you?
Here, we see how worried he is about his future, his identity, and his purpose in life.
I don't know, Tony. It's like just the fucking regularness of life is too fucking hard for me or something. I don't know.
But when Tony brings up the idea that Christopher is depressed, Christopher shrugs it off as something embarrassing and pathetic, as being in the mafia is all about presenting a masculine and tough image. The irony here is that Tony is basically being Dr. Melfi in this situation. He's asking Christopher questions, but little does Christopher know, Tony knows all this information because he too is depressed and sees a therapist. Even though Christopher denies being depressed, he is. Tony and Christopher are both depressed and cope with it in different ways. Tony deals with his depression by seeing a therapist and is eventually prescribed Prozac. Christopher, on the other hand, copes with his depression with drugs and alcohol throughout the entire series. In Season 1, we even see themes of suicide, with other characters like Allie cutting herself, displaying a cry for help after being sexually assaulted by Coach Hauser. In Season 2, we see more and more characters fall victim to the dark side of the mafia lifestyle. This is evident with Angie Bumpensero, as she discusses how her marriage is in shambles since the return of her husband and opens up about being depressed.
I'm sad and depressed. Thought of killing myself.
It's interesting to note that both Tony and Angie became depressed over Big Pussy. Later on in Season 2, we see David Scatino suffer from depression too and contemplate suicide. While also having a gambling problem and in the process of losing his sporting goods store, David puts a gun to his head and would likely have pulled the trigger once the gun was in his mouth if his wife didn't come home. David displays clear feelings of emptiness, loneliness, and guilt, whether it's drinking away his problems or hiding from his troubles by sleeping in his store. In the Season 2 finale, we see that Tony's symptoms of depression are still present, as he has a nightmare where he douses himself in gasoline and then lights himself on fire, killing himself. Tony wakes up and becomes a spitting image of his mother.
It's all a big nothing.
As the series progresses, we're treated to more characters suffering from depression and contemplate suicide. We see this with Patsy Parisi knowing who killed his brother and who ordered the hit, resulting in him becoming depressed. But in Season 3, nowhere are these themes of depression, suicide, and mental illness more visible than in the character of Gloria Trillo. When Tony slams her body to the ground and begins to choke her, Gloria wants Tony to kill her, simply to end her suffering from depression. At times, Gloria feels as if no one cares for her.
You got a fucking dream life compared to mine. Nobody cares if I'm alive or dead.
Depression and suicide can appear in a romantic relationship. We see this with Gloria throughout her and Tony's brief relationship, and later on in Season 4, we discover that she took her own life. We see the death of Gloria have a lasting impact on Tony, as he can be seen visibly shaken and at times can display emotion.
Why the fuck didn't you help her?
Even the heartbreaking tragedy of Jackie Jr. leaves everyone full of sorrow. We see his death affect his mother Rosalie and Meadow the most. Throughout the series, it feels as if there's always one major character who dies every season. We're constantly seeing Tony and his crew gather at funeral homes to pay their respects. In Season 4, we watch Artie fail in a business deal with Jean-Philippe, and as a result, he feels as if he's a failure to everyone in his life, including his childhood friend, Tony. Artie tries to kill himself with alcohol and pills and eventually overdoses. Luckily, Tony calls 911 and saves his life. There's also the tragic death of Bobby's wife Karen, which leaves a devastating impact on all of those who knew her, especially Bobby and his children. For some reason, the Sopranos and everyone around them can't seem to shake away from the theme of death, as it's an everyday occurrence in the mafia.
There's no release. I'm surrounded by death. My husband, my son, my friend.
Out of all the seasons of The Sopranos, Season 6 is the darkest, as it constantly displays themes of depression, suicide, death, and mental illness. The season begins with the tragic story of Eugene Pontecorvo. After being granted of almost $2 million of inheritance from his aunt who passed away, Eugene uses this as a possible way out of the toxic mafia lifestyle. We get a glimpse of Eugene's depression when speaking about his late aunt and how she was the only person who ever made him feel special.
Only person in my life ever made me feel special.
What are you gonna do?
Eugene's story is a tragic one and one that feels all too realistic, as he's a victim of his wife's nagging over Florida, has a son who has a terrible drug problem, and eventually becomes an informant and turns on his friends. We see Eugene struggle to balance his family life and his mob life all at once, much like Tony did throughout the show, and having the pressure of being an informant and wanting to move to Florida only added to his stress. After Tony declines Eugene's offer to retire from the mafia, Eugene takes matters into his own hands and tragically kills himself. Eugene does this because he knows how much of a change of scenery in Florida would mean to his wife and kids, and also for a chance at a restart in life. And with his mob life already on the decline by being an informant, Eugene had no choice but to take his own life. Later on in the season, we watch AJ suffer from major depression. It was clear to see that AJ adopted his mental health problems from his father, as Tony too suffered from depression. And similarly to Tony, AJ too suffered from panic attacks. AJ is no stranger when it comes to his mental health, as back in season 1, he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. When AJ meets the supposed love of his life in Blanca, he is madly in love with her. Eventually, AJ proposes, but Blanca has second thoughts and breaks up with AJ and returns the ring. This is the downfall of AJ and where he is clearly depressed.
Enough's enough.
Look, I'm fucking depressed, okay?
We watch as immediately following their breakup, AJ displays the themes of emptiness and loneliness. At times, he feels disinterested in activities and more interested about the conflicts going on around the world. AJ goes through extreme withdrawal by showcasing worthlessness and guilt. This is done by him not eating and not sleeping.
What are you doing up so early?
Couldn't sleep.
Much like his father, AJ too began seeing a therapist and was eventually prescribed antidepressants. After AJ picks himself up by hanging out with his old high school friends, AJ begins to head back down the dark road of depression and eventually drops out of college again and quits his job. AJ was pushed to the absolute limits of major depression and attempted to kill himself. AJ was eventually admitted to an inpatient psychiatric facility and was given the therapy that he needed. When mental illness is common within a family, parents could at times feel responsible, guilty, and ashamed, much like Tony here.
He's got that putrid, rotten fucking Soprano gene.
Throughout The Sopranos, it's evident that everyone within the lifestyle of the mafia is surrounded by themes of depression, death, suicide, and mental illness. It's a world where we see tough guys like Tony, who are also dangerous criminals and murderers, become not so tough after all. It's a world where guys display strong masculinity and are forced to suppress any pain or emotion to maintain their image. For a guy like Tony to admit pain is to admit weakness in the mafia. But it's not just Tony who battles with mental health. We see lots of characters visit a therapist, from Carmela to Tony, AJ, and even Janice. There are countless other examples of depression and suicide throughout the show, like the crooked Vin Makazian who jumps off a bridge after being busted at a brothel, or Meadows' roommate Caitlin. It's interesting to note that as the series progresses, the overall look and feel of the show becomes darker as well, with season 1 featuring bright colors and events like AJ's birthday party and barbecues, while season 6 has this dark gray tone to it and features mostly tragic deaths. Let me hear your thoughts about the connections between The Sopranos and themes like death, suicide, and depression. And if I missed any other depressed characters, be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. For more Sopranos themed videos, keep it locked here, right here on this channel.